Good evening. Hi, everybody. I said, hi, everybody. Thank you. Okay. Cool. Everyone's got a beer. Everyone's ready to hear about hops and maybe ask some questions about hops later. Oh, you don't know. You guys want to get beers? No? Yeah, the hop growers do not have beers. The brewers have beers. Go figure. My name is Josh Noel. I write about beer for the Chicago Tribune, among other things. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Greg. And I'm very happy to be here on this stage for Chicago Craft Beer Week, talking about hops with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are making hops happen in the industry. And obviously hops are quite significant in the industry. I was supposed to say to you guys on the stage privately before, but I forgot. Talk into the microphone like I am. Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah. Talk into the microphone, speak loud, speak proud. So let's start by introducing ourselves. Say, if you would, who you are, what you do, and if you have a beer in your hand, what you're drinking.
I don't have a beer. I'm Bonnie Steinman of Hophead Farms. I'm a hop grower, a processor, importer, supplier, beer lover.
Hi everybody, my name is Jason Ebel. I'm the co-founder of Two Brothers Brewing Company and been at it for about 18 years with my brother in the western suburbs of Chicago. And I'm drinking Wobble IPA. Wobble. What's that?
The gentleman to my right is very concerned by the fact that he might be drinking his own beer. All right. My name is Jeremy Marshall. I'm the brewmaster for the Lagunitas Brewing Company. I live in California, where I've worked for 13 years. And I was actually out here brewing in Chicago. As some of you guys know, we have a large brewery here in Chicago and a large brewery in California. And tonight I am drinking a Mars Jungle Boogie. Pretty delicious, actually. And on that note...
Hi, my name is Eric Hobbs. I am the co-founder of Penrose Brewing Company, a smaller brewery out of the western suburbs, Geneva to be more specific. My partner Tom and I have been open for just over 14 months, and very happy to have had a good first year under our belt. Of course, I'm drinking my own beer, Fractal IPA. Very nice. My name's... Oh, it's fine, be proud. You're not committing treason.
My name is James Altweis. I'm the president, CEO, and head janitor at Gorst Valley Hops. We are from up north there in Wisconsin, don't you know? And
God's country.
Yeah, we're happy to help be supplying hops back into this region.
All right, thanks everyone. I'm drinking actually Eric's beer also. So. And then down there is my, I have a Lagunitas beer. So. I drank one of beers last night. I was here, I had some Wobble. True story.
I saw him.
You saw it. I want to start sort of abstractly about the subject that we're all here to discuss, hops. And the craft beer renaissance has been led, inarguably, by the IPA. It's been the most popular style for more than 10 years. It's, I think IPA and Pale Ale, both of which obviously rely very heavily on hops for their character, make up for something like 60% of craft beer sales. And this is, I will admit, a sort of a hard question to answer, but anyone is welcome to take a stab at it. Why? what is so damn satisfying about hoppy beer? And there's no right answer. It's talking about taste is sort of a very imperfect thing, but there is something very, very satisfying about hops in beer. And I'm curious what any of you think it might be. And I can supply my own answer at the end, but I'm more interested in what you guys have to say. Jeremy.
I'll start and then pass it around. So to me, hops are the spirit that inhabits a fresh beer. When you have a fresh beer, the hops are there, they're present in the form of aromas, and as that beer begins to age, it's the first thing to like fleet out of the bottle, even though that bottle is sealed. It's like a ghost that leaves. But from the hops, if you boil hops, you get bitterness, which, you know, shit beer has bitterness. It's just measurable as IBUs, and that's all it is, and that's the soft resins going into solution and becoming bitter. But hops also have essential oils in them. And from these oils, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of chemical compounds and combinations that leads to memories. So it leads to papayas, mangoes, coconuts, apricots, blackberries, sometimes a skunk's ass, maybe cat pee, things both good or bad depending on who you are. And to me, that's the complexity and the magic of hops. So, who wants to go?
Yeah, I want to kind of second what Jeremy was saying. Can you hear me? Okay. I want to second what Jeremy was saying because I think it's the diversity and the complexity that you get from the hops is more important to me than the bitterness. The fact that it leads to different flavor characteristics and all the different varietals, all the different aromas that you get from those varietals that these guys grow every day. It's pretty amazing, and they have to handle these hops correctly. They don't just grow it, but they have to dry them and ship them and pelletize them all properly for us to be able to use. Then the way we use them to get the flavors into the beer. It's quite a process, but it is very satisfying when you have a hoppy beer.
Jason, just to follow up on that, sort of flavor-wise, what is it like? What itch do hops scratch? Like, where do you think the appeal is? Just as a drinker on the palate, what is it doing to all these people who just love an IPA?
I think it's more than just a single thing, right? There's so many flavor compounds you can get. It's hard to pinpoint one thing. It gets that nice. Right now, I got a nice lingering bitterness on the back of my tongue that I'm really enjoying as I'm speaking right now, because I love hoppy beers. But what I love is that fruity character, the papaya, the mango, the passion fruit, the cat pee, Simcoe hops, garlic. You get so many different characters, and when you start to play, you're like a chef. You get to play with these different characters and build a beer that's really cool based off of all these different varieties of hops.
I'll say for me
just like you mentioned, Jeremy, memory, it brings memories, and for being a grower, when we actually started growing hops and had them in a beer for the first time, I said, it's like hearing your child's voice in a crowd. I've been smelling it for so long, waiting for it to get to that right point, and now I get to have it in a beer, and you still can recognize it if it's done right. And it's just that personality, like there's so many different faces in a crowd, there's different instruments in an orchestra. You can get different flavors and just personalities from different hops, and that's what makes all the different beers that people make special. Not just one beer. I mean, how many beers are up here? So I think it kind of paints, it gives us the palette, or you the palette, to make beautiful things.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, because I like to talk to brewers about, there's only so many great works of art you can paint with a palette of beige, right? And hops can add that pop of color, even though you've got a really great malt base and yeast combination and brewing process or beer style. Hops are going to bring their punctuation, right? Their exclamation points or their underscores. But as a plant chemist, You know, there's somewhere between 200 and 300 compounds, aroma compounds that we can identify in hops that we know about, and there's way more than that we can't. And some of these compounds we can sense them on our palate in the parts per trillion with a T range. Very, very, very tiny. So just a little bit can go a long way. And the fact that brewers have that art down, they're artists of knowing how that's going to match up well in the rest of their brewing process just fascinates me, amazes me.
Cool. Yeah, for me, there's no beer that I prefer to have after a long day of work than an IPA, pretty much. You know, later on I'll get into whatever, a Saison with my dinner, or a, you know, barrel-aged stout toward the end of the night, or lambic, somewhere in between. But yeah, for me, the hops just scratch that itch, and for me, it's all the. I think it's the. There's a balance in it, you know, between the bitter and the juicy and the fruity and the pine. It's just such hops are just so, it's kind of a luscious, evocative experience to me. And they're also sort of, in some ways, hard to understand because there's a lot going on, but in a very basic way, it's also very easy to understand. It's just like your tongue just knows, yes, this is good, this is juicy, feels good, you know? So yeah, good stuff. Everyone, I think, probably has an idea of what these brewers do, but most of us probably don't have much of an idea of what Midwest hop farmers do. So I'd like to hear from each of you briefly, because everyone can go down the rabbit hole with their experience. But give everyone here just an idea of what you do day in, day out, how your business operates, what hops you grow, where these hops grow, how they find their way into our beers that we drink, things like that.
Ladies first, Bonnie.
We grow hops in southwest Michigan. Our main farm at this time is Hickory Corners. We have 30 acres, which consists of the trellising system and about 30,000 plants on site. And
all ladies, by the way.
Yes, all ladies. That's my favorite part of the tour is that we find any males, we rip them out.
Boys are bad.
Yeah.
Boys are bad. Can't let any boys in the world.
Yep. So and the hops are, the plant is, they're a perennial from a rhizome, so they come up every year. We've planted unless we decide to replant and pull out a variety, or replace one, or add one. We're pretty much done planting on site, and they come up in the spring after they need a winter dormancy period. So we basically wait for the snow to melt, and then they're crowned. Once the first growth is up, we have a system of crowning, and then the ropes are tied and put right into the ground, and 2 ropes per crown is what we do, and then they wait for them to be to the right height and select the best vines, usually about 3, that go up the ropes, and then they go, and they take a lot of nitrogen and a lot of scouting. That's one of my main duties, is other than talking to brewers about what they can do with their hops and enjoying beer and talking to growers, I scout the fields, and I make sure that we have the proper balance of beneficial insects that can take care of any insect issues, because we really don't like to spray insecticides, and also will spot any disease issues early on. So it's a lot of walking of the fields. It's like 9 miles, I think, if you were going to do each one up and down. So I skip some rows sometimes. But yeah, so that's like right now, that's what's happening. And come harvest, we wait. We watch flowers develop, and we wait till there's perfect timing. We invite brewers out to to check them out and choose select hops for harvest beers. We were talking about that before before we came up on stage. Harvest ales are really exciting. Maybe we could talk about that. So just waiting for harvest is a really nice experience too. It's usually mid-August. Two brothers, Penrose. We'd love to work with Lagunitas. We deal with very small breweries, home brewers too, and large breweries like Founders and Bells. Where we just shipped some hops to China and Taiwan, but we began. Our sole purpose was to just provide hops as close to home as we could in the best quality we could, but we realized that there was a lot bigger need for all over. So right now, I think we're around 200 brewery clients at this point.
So we have a similar setup with Bonnie. We actually started about the same time. We kind of cut our teeth together on how to do this, how to do hop production in the Midwest, because all of the knowledge base that's on the internet, the collected sum of all human knowledge, is about growing hops either in Central Europe or the Pacific Northwest. And the last time I looked, the Midwest is not either of those. So it takes, we've had and still are developing our own techniques in this region to grow the same damn plant that they grow in those other regions and make it productive. We have different disease pressures, we have different annual timings that we have to meet, and the data are just not there for us. So we've kind of had to take a bit of a calculated risk when we started doing this to kind of figure it out ourselves. So then, our trellises are anywhere between 16 and 20 feet tall. We like to tell people when they're riding past on their bikes, what are you growing? It's like, those are climbing strawberries. They're really, really productive. But you have to get them way at the top. But yeah, we have to dry them once they're harvested if they're not going into a wet beer. We call a wet hop or harvest ale. Dry them down, or it's like I told these guys, how to wreck your crop in 30 minutes or less. Right, Ken? Yeah? No, Kent hasn't ruined too many of his hops. And then we both pelletize them, so we squash them down in these little rabbit pellet looking things, and then we vacuum pack them and gas purge bags and freeze them and analyze them, and there's not much to do. Just about enough time to have about a 6-week breather before we start all over again next year. So.
Is there a particular profile, like flavor profile of Midwest hops, or is it similar to what could be? Go for it.
This is one of my favorite topics.
And this is a question for both of you. I mean, is what you grow here the same as what you can buy from the Pacific Northwest, or do Midwestern hops have their own character? And if so, what is that character?
In my opinion, as I'm now used to saying, I think year over year the microclimate and the weather has a bigger impact on whether like a variety like Cascade is going to be similar or different than where we're going to find it. But in general, in very broad strokes, I think that we are finding now that hops are growing in a lot more places than they have in 150 years, that there can be some locational differences, but they're very, I think, subtle. And Mother Nature's, I tell my growers all the time, she's got the keys. She's in charge. And we can have one year on one variety where if it's hot and dry and that particular variety doesn't like that condition, then they're going to have maybe a more oniony, garlicky profile than they normally would. So even year to year within my own site, the variability is huge.
We have found 2 varieties in particular that are proven to have a different character. It's similar, but enough of a difference that some brewers don't want to replace that variety in a beer. Rather, they like to create a new beer for that. Our Cascade pulls a lot more citrus, tends to be grapefruit depending on what time it's harvested. especially wet hop ales, you can really get that out of. But if you're picking them in the right time and drying them carefully, that'll show in the pellets as well. And then Chinook. Chinook has less of a pine resin character and more fruity, but that also varies when during the time of harvest. You know, this year we did 3 different harvest timings, and the early one was fruitier, the mid one was a little bit less, but it pulled a bit fuller flavor, and then and it had the highest oil content. And then the last one had a higher alpha acid, and it was a bit less. It was more pine resin, and it had a little bit lower oil content, but not a lot. And then we also have a variety of Saaz, we call Super Saazer, that is higher alpha, and it is very zingy, more lemony, and that's been picked up pretty nicely by some brewers as well.
We found the same thing with our Chinook, is it's all about timing and oil content. And we've had some brewers that would quit brewing their beer, let's say, when they can't get a hold of our Willamette. Willamette you can buy on the spot market pretty easily, but I'm prone to think it has a whole lot more to do with how we treat our hops, both in the production and the processing, more so than it is maybe about our exact location, but I'm sure location has a lot to play into it too. Once you really dig into the science of how we do this and the process, how we handle these things, you know, from the time they come up to the time they're in the bag, massively impacts quality. And being smaller growers, I just think we have more ability to pay closer attention to those sorts of things. So.
Jeremy just leaned over and made a couple good suggestions about sort of the background of hops and the history of hops. You want to talk about that real quick? Yeah. And then I want to ask each brewer, I'll just throw this out there real quick so you can think about it. I don't know if you meant to do this or not, Trey Elder, but the brewing panel is interesting because Penrose is pretty Belgian-driven, Belgian yeast and pretty much everything, right? Lagunitas, I think, it's pretty fair to say, is a pretty hop-driven brewery. And then I would call Two Brothers kind of like the five-tool player, if I can use the baseball analogy, doing a lot of different things well. The utility infielder. I'd pick five-tool player myself. So I want to know, after Jeremy talks about the history of hops a little bit, sort of each brewery, how you conceive of your brewery's approach toward hops and relationship toward hoppy beer, and you know what is in our glass. But Jeremy, talk about those things that you just leaned over and mentioned to me.
Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this as quick and simply as possible. Hops follow brewers. Before you had hops, people just threw whatever they could find into the beer to provide bitterness to balance against the sweetness coming from the sugars and the malt. So they would use heather teps and bog myrtle and whatever else. This was in English countries, and that was called ale. And then one day somebody found a wild hop plant and said, wow, this really makes beer. Then that became what was beer. And wherever you find brewers, you find hops. So you have the English tradition, which is primarily ales, so you think hops like Goldings and Fuggles and hops like that. And then you have the German brewing tradition, which is more lagers, so think like your Hallertau, your Tettnang, your Satz, and hops like that. And then those hops married together and interbred and were developed by early breeders that did everything the old-fashioned way, which is today's breeders still do it the old-fashioned way, which is you take hops are dioecious, so you need a male and a female to make a seed, and they're also heterozygous. So heterozygous means each seed is unique. So they do just what the pot growers do, which is a good segue to the family that hops are in, which is the Cannabinaceae family. So technically, the reason hops make resins is the same reason that pot plants make resins. It's a signal to pests saying, don't eat me or do eat me, we want this seed to survive. It's all related. But back to the breeding, they take pollen from a male, and that's the only use that the males are good for. They're not good for anything else. And she was right. One thing you do, most hop farmers will give a nickel to their kids that can go and bring back a male, or in this day and age, usually that's like a $5 bill. You find a male. You get pollen from a male, you throw it in a bag, you tie that bag over the branch of a female, you get like 20,000 seeds. Each seed is unique. You got to plant each and every one of those to see out of that. You might get one variety 15 years later, and that's called hop breeding. But basically, to tie those two brewing traditions, English and German, you know, a lot of Germans settled in Wisconsin when the United States was filling in, and we told the Indians, like, manifest destiny. You don't know what that means. It's kind of like the land's ours, bitch. But anyways, they didn't understand that part. But so we were filling in the country, and the Germans settled in Wisconsin. So the hop growing regions used to be out here. They never were the other areas. And they were also a lot in New York State as well. And that's where the hops were grown. And then there were some disease called powdery mildew came along. This is what happens when you have water, and you have humidity. And it affected all of the hops. And that's the same disease that your pot growers talk about a lot, because that'll wipe out your crop. And I wouldn't know about that firsthand. So the hops moved to the Pacific Northwest because the Pacific Northwest is a desert. And what do you have when you have a desert? You have soil conditions that you can manipulate with all of that water rolling off the Cascades. So when you have a desert, you start and you can create any condition you want for any hop variety. So that's why most of the hops are grown there. And then now following craft, it's good to see that the rest of the country is starting to grow hops again. And they're figuring out varieties that are resistant to the mildews and to the problems. And I think what you'll see in 10 years is that there'll be hops growing all over the United States again, just like it was originally.
Thank you, Jeremy. So Lagunitas, I was going to say arguably, but I don't even think it's really arguably, I think it's a fact, helped popularize IPA. So I'm curious what Lagunitas' relationship to the hop is now. Are you guys still, I mean, to what degree do you see the hop as the engine of the brewery, and to what degree are you thinking of the hop when you're innovating and trying to think of what's next? Do you consider Lagunitas a hop-forward brewery? Is it essential to what you guys do?
Someone from a very large brewery, Boston Beer, I'll just say it, they do television commercials, which is usually, you know, what you do when you're too big for your own good. And I think Jim Koch failed the SATs because in this particular television commercial I'm thinking of, he said, hops are to beer what grapes are to wine. But that's completely false. The answer to that should be grain. Grain is to beer but what he was getting at, and so we can forgive the fact that he failed the SATs, that the hop is the soul of the beer. And so we think a lot about the hops and our relationship, and we're very hop forward. And we think a lot, and nothing is more sad than when beer gets old and all that hard work you put into the hops just kind of flies out of it. But for us, it's everything. So,
Eric, as a brewery that is pretty Belgian-inspired, what role does the hop play for what you guys do?
I think, at least from Penrose perspective, we might argue that the soul of the beer is actually the yeast. But I think you can kind of go, you see kind of why we would go any one direction. Depends on what you try to put forward, right? And so, at least the way we design our beers, you know, there's a lot of people making a lot of great IPAs, and we all just happen to be in the same portfolio too. So, I think a lot goes into how we decide how we want to make beers. First and foremost, 4 years ago when we wrote our business plan, it was like, what do we want to drink? And we like to look at each individual ingredient, water, malt, yeast, hops, as kind of this balancing act. And for what we choose to do with hops, we try to use it as a way to either accent yeast character, yeast aromas, the esters we get out of our yeast, but also kind of create that counterbalance to whatever malt character we're going for and the sweetness we're drawing in our beer. And that's kind of how we first started the idea of Penrose, because what we brew consistently is more sessionable, more approachable styles that are going to be that 4% to 6% range. And then you take that a step further, you look at what we do with our oak aging and a lot of alternative fermentation in wine barrels and things like that, where hops are even less relevant. It becomes more of a, how do we play with these hops and what do we even want out of these hops? Sometimes we actually look for old hops and simply use that as a way to kind of add a subtle taste of bitterness to just balance out sweetness. One of the newest projects we're working on is actually called de minimis. It's a session sour where we ferment with a saison yeast after we had kettled sour, and what we choose to then accent each one of those beers with is in fact a German hop. So this first one we have coming out in June is called de minimis blanc, and it's featuring Hallertau Blanc, which has kind of a very white grapey vinous character, which we use on aroma mostly because it doesn't really play against the bitterness or the lactic profile or the tartness of the beer. We do the same thing with de minimis mandarina, which is kind of modeled after the Bavarian mandarina hop. And then we're doing de minimis roux, which is we're profiling and using Huell melons. So we're taking Bavarian hops, which is very not Belgian, and we're using them in a beer that is traditionally more designed as kind of a Berliner Weiss, but we're tweaking with different brewing technique, kettle souring technique, and then obviously primary fermentation with the saison yeast. So our approach with hops is much more of a backstage. You're a supporting role. You're not the lead. You're not out front. You're there to work in harmony with everything else. And not to say what we do is right or wrong, or what these guys do are right or wrong. It's just what makes Penrose maybe kind of go in a little different direction.
Does that mean the hops are less essential to what you do, or does it mean that they're just more of a factor in what you do rather than being the heart of the operation?
No, I definitely wouldn't say they're less essential. I think we just talk about anything in harmony or balance. Every factor is key to creating harmony and balance. And I think every one of these guys that makes beer up here creates very balanced beers, very amazing beers. What we do with the hops is more of we just try to make sure that the role that they play is what, and I'll speak for Tom here, is what Tom had in mind. He's our brewmaster. He's the one who designs this. That role is essential, but it's to be designed this way. And if it sits in its place and it does what it's supposed to do, you guys will all hopefully appreciate the beer and appreciate what his perspective is.
Cool. Jason, two brothers, I think Cain and Ebel, which is a hoppy red rye, right? I got that right? Is one of the, truly has been one of the great beers that helped fuel Chicago craft beer. When did that beer come out? 2000, okay. But hops were always sort of in, well, like I said, you guys do a lot of different things well, and hops were sort of in Cain and Ebel, and then you did Prairie Path and Domaine du Page, which was and is your biggest seller. What has been, you guys never sort of, until maybe recently, you guys never bought all into hops, correct? What was sort of the two brothers' approach toward hops? And then we'll talk about what it is now, because I know it's changed.
So I don't know if I believe that we didn't buy into hops. I mean, I think when we started 18 years ago, we had to set ourselves apart. We were saying in the mid-90s, what's everybody making? And it was a pale ale and an amber ale. So how do we set ourselves apart? Well, let's come up with some beers that play a little differently, like Domaine du Page. Hops are an essential part of it, but then we were always trying to experiment. We started wet hopping a beer made in the Midwest in 2000. So shipping wet hops we now buy from these guys, but getting them out of Washington State, overnighted with dry ice. And so we've been into hops for a long time, but we always believe in balance. We like to really make sure that the malt has a place and shows through as well on certain beers. Other beers, like Blavel nowadays, is very hop forward. But we like to do a lot of different stuff. We actually age our own hops in our boiler room for our sour beers, because we want almost no hop character, but you need a little tiny bit. So hops are just such an integral part of everything that's done by all of these guys, by all of us brewers, that the exciting part is being a chef and being able to tweak it and try all these different varieties and the different methods. And so to us, they're definitely an integral part, but we do tend to like balanced beers as well.
However, there's been a little change at the brewery. We were talking before this that, so Domaine DuPage continues to be your top seller, correct? 7 months ago, what percentage of your sales is Domaine about? Oh, okay, never mind. Domaine DuPage is #1. Everyone's had it here, right? Great beer. 7 months ago, you introduced Wobble IPA, and 7 months later, Wobble IPA is the second biggest seller in the entire Two Brothers portfolio. I find that kind of amazing. And that as well. Why did you create that beer in the first place? Did you feel like you had to sort of catch up and get involved in that corner of the IPA market? And did you think that it would take off like this?
So no, we don't really think about having to catch up with other people. We just kind of do what we enjoy, and hopefully you guys all enjoy it when we do it. If not, we've got a lot of other things that we do that hopefully you'll enjoy one of those other ones instead. So we kind of do what's fun for us. We were at a beer event and talking about we were kind of talking about the fact that most of the beers we do are very in balance. And it'd be funny to do a beer that was out of balance, and when you're out of balance, you wobble, which is where the name actually comes from. So to be out of balance, we said we should make a West Coast IPA, and we tried some kind of newer techniques. Jeremy's probably using them now, where you don't do much. So you get your bitterness in the hop from boiling for a very long period of time. So the first boil additions give you a lot of the bitterness. Well, we put almost no hops in the early edition of this beer, and we load the hell out of it at the end, and we still get a little bit of utilization out of the hops, but we use so much that it translates to a very bitter beer. But what it does is also gives kind of a depth of character. You get this, certainly there's something to be said for the plant material that's in the beer. I don't know how to call it, but you can't replicate it with, say, an oil. I'm sure you guys would agree with that. You have to have the plant material in there, the silage in there. And when you add that much to it, it just gives a depth of flavor and character. And so we're trying some new techniques and just actually trying to have fun. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I tell everybody at work all the time, we're in the beer business, don't forget to have fun. My dad sold insurance. We don't do that.
I think it's interesting, though, that a brewery dedicated to balance makes a beer intentionally out of balance, and that it becomes your second biggest seller. I mean, what does that say about what's happening in the beer industry right now? And I want to hear from, I know what the farmers think. They think, yeah. But I want to know okay, maybe not, but I want to know what everyone thinks about that the palate has become so attuned toward hops.
You know, for us, Domaine DuPage is still #1. It's a very balanced beer. Might even be slightly on the sweeter side. So I know that people are still looking for other beers, but on an everyday drinking beer, hops are definitely king nowadays. And we embrace it, whatever the consumer wants. We've never gone out saying this is going to be our flagship beer. It's here's all the beers we produce. You guys decide what you like. We'll keep making it.
I'd really like to hear what Eric has to say on this. I hope I'm not revealing too much. Eric and I have talked previously about how Penrose came out of the gate with some sort of lighter, very balanced Belgian session style ales and had to veer a little bit toward hops more than you initially planned.
Absolutely. That's, I mean, Jason nailed it. You make beer for people to drink. People don't want to drink it. If you keep making it, you're not going to stay in business very long. And I think what we kind of realized with Penrose, we have this tap room where we get to really experiment and do whatever really inspires us, which is great. But ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish with our perspective on what we push out to the market is our interpretation of what we both like and what you guys have told us you like. And two new beers that have kind of come out of the mix here are Fractal, our Belgian IPA, which is on tap right now, and then Desirous, our white IPA. Right? Both are kind of the style hybrids that we've been working on in our tap room and have just seen they're constantly 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 every week. People are just drinking more of those beers. And we're like, you know what? Let's just put them out in the market and we'll go with it. And you know, that has kind of been what has been the result of the market telling us what they want.
Does that market bum you out at all? The fact
No, definitely not. I mean, because I think, you know, it's great because the same market that buys all that beer on the market are the same people that show up and buy out all of our wild ales in 15 minutes on a Saturday morning. So we kind of get to do both things, and you know, one allows us to scale the other. So it's a good thing. It's balance. You know, it's kind of the ironic word of the day here. And if every time we say balance now, this whole room should scream like it's like Pee-wee's Playhouse. Balance. Right? So, but it's true, right? The market is going to tell us what we should be making, and we're going to continue to develop those new beers based on what we know both inspires us, but what ultimately sells.
Jeremy, you've been in Lagunitas, what'd you say, 14 years? 13 years, almost 14. I'm curious from your vantage, to what degree has the industry changed toward what you guys do? Because again, Lagunitas was doing hoppy, in-your-face beers, as early as anyone, more or less. Does it feel like a different landscape to you now?
Not really. I mean, I try to get away from those like West Coast, East Coast are, malty, West Coast hoppy. I mean, in Northern California, you had to use a shit ton of hops to pierce through people's resonated mouths, I mean, because everyone's like smoking so much weed. That's my personal theory.
Is that doesn't sound like good beer though. Like, I'll be honest, like I love Green Flash. But I tried a triple IPA from them recently, and I thought it was undrinkable.
This does happen, and back to what Jason was talking about earlier, that veggie character. There's a certain character you get from hops called resinous, and resinous is more of a texture. It's not a flavor, it's not an aroma, and the best way I can describe it, it's like taking a steak knife and scraping it down your tongue. And the beers of Northern California, when I moved there, all had this character. And I was like, these beers are terrible. These are undrinkable. And now the rest of the country is making them, and this is what people want. And I have to say, brewers brew the beer that they want to drink. But what's happened is that nowadays, like a lot of beer drinkers are also brewers. Like how many people in the room are home brewers? Show of hands, I mean, loud and proud. You guys brew too, and I gotta say that what we do is just big homebrew in a lot of ways. I never cease to be amazed when I'm at the brewery or at another friend's brewery and I see blow-off buckets or, the same shit that I have to deal with in my pantry or whatever when I homebrew, And, but back to like how far can it go, the IPA craze, it's not about credit, it's not about, fads, it's just about what people want. And, one thing, people kind of drink what their dad didn't. So like if I ever get around to having kids, and my kids are getting into that age where they're gonna we're gonna peel for dad's beer. They're gonna open up my fridge and they're gonna find we're kind of guilty as known to the brewery that only makes IPAs. They're gonna find a bunch of IPAs, drink them, and then I'm gonna have overnight like an old style or a Hams or a PBR disciple. It could really well be that these IPA people have kids and then their kids are back to the shit beer.
Actually, I would like to hear from everyone. What is the beer in your fridge? What do you drink on a Tuesday night? I want to hear from everyone on this.
What do I drink on Tuesday night? It's usually different than Tuesday morning. Being a hop grower, it's occupational hazard. Because you show up to a sales call or you're going to talk to a brewer about hop chemistry or something like that in your beer, and it's 8:45 in the morning and you have a pint in front of you. And then you go visit another one at 10:30 and you have another one. It's totally seasonal for me. Right now it's something that's light and refreshing because I'm a farmer. I'm not looking for something heavy and something that's going to get me bombed real quick. I want something.
Unlike in the middle of winter, you're looking to get bombed left and right.
Unlike in the middle of winter, it's people running up the alcohol content. But again, we only have like 6 days where we don't have anything to do. So then we can get.
Well, I guess what are your go-to breweries or beers, or just something that's always good to see in your fridge?
I've had for about 12 or 13 years now a personal rule where I won't drink beer unless it's made within 300 miles of where I live. And so it's now Lagunitas moving up here. I can enjoy that. So I tend to.
You just don't want to say New Glarus and make us all sad.
No, well, it's not real easy for me to get 2 brothers in Wisconsin either. So hey, to each their own. But I patronize my customers first and foremost. They've worked with me and they're buying our hops at a premium price. Damn right, I'm going to help support them. So yeah, it's going to be New Glarus or Wisconsin Brewing Company or the Guile here in Chicago, or whomever else is going to be in the customer base. And then if I have the opportunity to get something from outside of my region, immediate outside of my region, then I'll grab it. But my go-tos are my main brewer customers.
Eric, what are you drinking these days? And don't say Penrose.
No, well, of course.
Other than Penrose.
Yeah, right. Allagash is always a staple in our fridge. Some local favorites, big fans and friends with Solemn Oath. I feel like we're always at each other's breweries, so we always end up bringing beer. 2 brothers, I think I got a lot of wobble in my fridge right now because ironically enough, my wife, who's never drank hop forward beers ever, likes wobble. Yeah, I know, right? I know, right? And then, well, the good thing is having the brewery right in near the wholesaler. We end up having a lot of folks on ride with our local wholesaler rep park their car in our front parking lot, and then inevitably when they end their day, they bring beer in. So a lot of off-color. Tend to get some half-acre nowadays, which is great. So again, kind of like you guys, local. I mean, I like to keep things, support the friends that we have locally. But I'd have to say like Allagash White, their Saison are probably 2 staples in my fridge all the time.
Jeremy, what are you drinking in your Northern California refrigerator?
I tend to drink the beer from the breweries that have visited us most recently. So we seem to get a lot of visits from Stone, so I have some Stone beer. We're really close to Anchor Brewing, so a lot of Liberty Ale, Anchor Steam. I'm kind of just getting awakened to the breweries of Chicago, and there's a lot of really awesome stuff going on. But I think craft beer drinkers tend to be kind of slutty when it comes to there's not really a concept of brand loyalty. I think they like to sample.
It's called open-minded.
So they like to sample. So these little things. Do they do that thing at Whole Foods where they have a bar inside? Do they do that? They did that out in California, and I think that's kind of cool because it's you go and you look a Whole Foods beer selection, and it's insane. I mean, it's beer brewed with coffee beans that have been pooped out by animals, and it's you tell me that 10 years ago, I'd laugh at you and say this beer movement's gone too far. But now, now I'm oh, maybe I'll try that beer, but I don't know if I can commit to a whole 6-pack. I think sampling is really the key, and so I don't have like a fridge mainstay. I mean, we get a lot of free of our own beer, and after a while that gets kind of boring, and you want to try something different. So.
Yeah, as a aside that we don't need to go down too far, I've been a champion of getting away from the 12-ounce 6-pack personally. I think it's just a little tired. There aren't a lot of beers I need 6 bottles of in my fridge, because I think it's all about varying it up and just different tastes and it's quality and variation. Jason, what are you drinking out of your fridge these days? And I want to hear from all of stage left, please.
So my brother and I started Windy City we owned it for 13 years. So Windy City is a wholesaler that's still in existence. We carried Lagunitas and Penrose. We carried about, I think we had 28 suppliers. We were forced by the state of Illinois to sell it because they decided a brewery could no longer own a wholesaler. But because of that, I have a lot of friends in the industry, and I'm not quite don't know how to say it PC, but
So I love American craft beer, but I love imports too. So unlike these guys, I do have one beer in my fridge all the time. It's Samfuyen Triple from Belgium. But yeah, I have a lot of beer in my fridge all the time from all over the world, and I just enjoy beer. So I love going to the fridge and pulling out something different every day. So I can't really name anything other than that one.
Fair enough.
We have a lot of different beers in our fridge and in our basement and in front of our beer fridge. And the other day I thought, these are all so good, but all I really want is an IPA. And there was not a plain IPA in sight. I tend to go for Two Hearted because it's like, if you can't decide, that's what I pick.
I did a story on Ray Daniels of the Cicerone program a couple of years ago, or actually like 5 years ago now, and I asked him, what's your go-to beer? And he said, Two Hearted. I think it's a safe, yeah. It's got a couple little preps out there. All right, so we're going to do questions soon, so I hope there's some questions out there. But I want to ask, especially we'll start with the brewers. How there's a lot of talk about, there I think are 3,500 breweries in this country right now with 2,000 more in planning, which would be the most breweries the United States has ever had by far, which is a lot of breweries that need a lot of hops. So I'm curious, how competitive and challenging is it to get your hands on the hops that you want? And I'm particularly interested in the answer because we've got Penrose, which is quite small, medium-sized Two Brothers, and then Lagunitas, which is massive at this point. Eric, how easy or hard is it to get your hands on the hops that you want?
Well, certain varietals are fairly easy to get, like Cascade. I mean, as long as you're smart enough to know you're just going to plan ahead, you just kind of budget what you need. Even out of the gates, you kind of have to do that. When you start getting creative and you think like, all right, I want to innovate, I want to do something that's more hop forward, which again didn't really align with what our plan was. We still, over a year ago, bought 2,200 pounds of Amarillo, which is a very classic, very punchy, tropical fruity hop, which I love. And I thought that was one that as we start to innovate beyond, or at least into what we just see the market demanding, we need to have one of those hops that we'll call a buzz hop, right? We need one of those. We need like a utility hop that we can kind of play with to create a new beer and to continue to boost a beer like Fractal, which is a beer we use that for. So you balance out what you think you're going to sell, and then you buy ahead. Well, the problem is, as a year one brewer, if you're wrong, you own those hops, right? And you pay regardless, right? So good thing is buzz hops, you can probably always move them. Other things that are less common or less desirable or less tradable are harder to move. So you just have to be very careful. So year one, I'm going to hedge my bets the other way and say, let's just see what the world tells me I should be making more of before I go ahead and buy a bunch of futures. So what I did was I budgeted spot prices into my business model for 2 years. Because I just assumed I would need to. And then I figured if I'm safe on what hop profiles I'm using, I don't necessarily need to worry about competing, then I'm not going to have the same hurdles that some other startups would have.
Are you doing a lot of selling of hops and trading of hops?
No, we don't. We had to do that a little bit with Amarillo to keep Fractal alive until September. But for the most part, no, we really haven't.
Jeremy?
I
mean, Lagunitas uses a shit ton of hops, right? I mean, how do you guys get those hops? Is it all contracts and massive contracts?
We're massively contracted out to 2021 and beyond.
And with farms where?
So like a little history. When you're small, you buy for a merchant because they have some services that they provide. They can store the hops for you cold because you don't have room in your brewery or you don't have a cooler. They can go out and find stuff for you. But 2007 marked the year that the merchants kind of let all the brewers down. So if you weren't brewing in that year, and like we were, 2007, 2008 was like the commodities crisis. And I remember literally getting a phone call from the guy that I got all my hops from, and he had 100% of our business, getting a very panicked phone call from him, like crying, going, buy hops, any hops, at any price. The sky is collapsing, I can't do anything for you, click. I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, what day is it? April 1st? God damn, it's not April 1st. So
what did you do?
So that was the day that well, first thing we do is we contact other breweries to be like, hey, are you fucked too? And they're like, yeah, we just got the phone call. We're fucked.
Did you call California brewers that day?
I called all kinds of, I started with the local brewers. Lagunitas, Chicago didn't exist yet. I actually did know some Chicago brewers, but they were like, little guys like Peace and, but basically everyone was like, yeah, we're fucked. And this before we had like alternatives to the Pacific Northwest, like no one was growing hops out here at the time. And that movement interested a lot of other areas into growing hops. And so I contacted another brewer, which was Anchor, right down the road in San Francisco, and they said, oh, we're fine. We always just buy hops from this farmer. And so we contacted the farmer, and the farmer asked to see a price list of what I was getting from the merchants. And he goes, holy shit, those $15.95 Willamettes I sell to this same merchant, I sell them to him for $1.95 a pound. And it was at this moment where we realized, man, this is an unregulated territory, and the farmer is the only guy getting screwed. And the farmer always gets screwed. I mean, it's terrible. So we said, well, wouldn't it be nice if the farmers could get these like really high prices, but that the merchants just weren't even a part of it? And we're like big or becoming big at the time. So we reached out to farmers. Well, first we tried to reach out to the farmers through our merchants. And that was an interesting game where they ran out of time. So
a merchant is like a distributor?
A merchant is kind of like a distributor, but we would fly to Yakima, they'd be like, here, come to our bar, we drink a bunch of beers. And all of a sudden we'd be like drunk and they'd be like, oh, we're out of time. And what happened to the farmers? So when we began speaking to the farmers directly, we found out these farmers very much wanted to talk to us. And they were very interested in seeing the prices that the merchants were getting. And I'm not trying to badmouth the merchants. I think what I'm really getting at is there was a few that jacked up the price, and then the other ones saw what was happening and they followed suit. So it's not like all of them are bad. Now they've kind of straightened out and they provide some very real services. But we reached out directly to farmers, and right now we're dealing with, I think, 60 farms. And we deal directly. Directly. And we're,
no middleman at all?
No middleman. We contract people.
So the big-ass Lagunitas has, I assume, someone whose job it is to deal with the hop farmers.
Yeah, that used to be my job, and it was like one of my favorite things to do, but trying to do that and also brew, it got tough. I mean, we don't really have, we just have a collection of people who give a shit. I mean, there's not really like one person's role. We're not that big. But, back to the farmers, I mean, we wanted to sit down with them and say, and we do the same thing for our barley, because barley is more like a commodity, it just competes for animals' digestive systems if it doesn't make the cut to become malt. We sat down and said, what is a fair price for your kids that are all going to universities to not be a hop farmer? All their kids left the nest. They were like, I watched mom and dad get screwed year after year. I don't want to be a farmer. And we sat down and said, what is a fair price? And we inked like 10-year deals. And then now, little by little, those kids are going back into the business. And then we sat down and said, that's about the best thing that we can hope for.
So as a result of that, your hop flow is pretty strong.
Yeah, we've had no trouble.
Is this mostly Pacific Northwest?
Mostly Pacific Northwest. Where we do get into trouble is where we don't have relations. So like the nice German hops being described, those are a little tight for us if we went out and tried to get some Mandarina, or especially the New Zealand varieties, or anything where we have to go through a merchant. It's like we're right back into this game where we hear the same stuff we heard a few years ago. And I guarantee you, if we weren't so busy that we could fly to these countries and meet what we would probably hear a different story.
And so it can be pretty competitive.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, right now there's so many new breweries. I believe it genuinely is competitive. But I mean, we just saw another giant price increase recently. I don't know if you guys have looked to 2016, 17, 18 hops, but they just went up about $3 a pound about 3 months ago, and it appears that not everybody knew that. But sorry to be a bummer.
Jason, how's Two Brothers' access to hops? And then the last question I'm going to ask, and I want everyone to answer, is what hop are you most excited about right now, and why? But first, how's Two Brothers' access to hops doing?
We're sort of like Jeremy. We contract out to 2020 right now with our farmers. We were a little bit luckier maybe than Lagunitas because we had a guy come along in about 2005 and said, hey, you got to think about contracting with the farms. So we're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I guess we got lucky because we didn't run into quite the problem sky was falling, but we had a secure load of hops in 2007 and 8. We've been able to keep that up. You know, the hard part, to Eric's point, is that you don't know what your growth pattern is going to be, so you contract 5 years out thinking that Domaine DuPage is going to kill it, and all of a sudden Wobble comes out of nowhere and you need the hops. So all the home brewers that are going to start a brewery, I do a class on starting your own brewery, and I always tell everybody, I know you love that IPA, but get ready to change it when you're going to go to full production size, because while you can get a pound of it at your homebrew store, you can't get 20,000 pounds of it to brew all year long with. So, you know, we're lucky because we've been at it for so long that we have a lot of relationships, and so we're in pretty good shape.
All right, what's everyone's hop they're excited about right now and why? And then we're going to take questions.
Whatever ones I can sell. That's my favorite one.
All right, Eric? No, I'm just kidding. No, I want to know what flavor profile and what's exciting to you right now. Don't say Citra.
I'm definitely not going to say Citra. I'm a traditionalist a bit, so I like the sort of the old standbys, but what I really like the most is one of those old standbys that is kind of, you know, one of the best kept secrets of brewing kind of thing. You know, one of my favorite hops right now is Brewer's Gold. Not only does it grow like a freaking weed and is immune to everything, it's a good producer, but it's also got this kind of old school utilitarianism about it that, man, it just plays well in everything. A lot of
kind of beers do we see that in?
Oh, it's I mean, it was the hop for a long time. You know, back in the, what was it, the late '60s, early '70s. You know, you can get that into anything. I call it kind of rustic and robust. So anything that's going to have a pretty good malt body to it, you can find it in there. And our brewers are using our Brewer's Gold and everything from blondes through to stouts in some cases. So it is a utility player, but definitely a Midwestern hop.
Cool. Brewer's Gold. Eric, what hop has you is exciting you right now?
Those German hops we were talking about for the De Minimis project are really something I've never even given any thought to previous to this project. With these aroma hops we've been using, whether it's the Hallertau Blanc, the Bavaria Mandarina, Pure Melon, these things that we're trying to emulate fruit aromas in session sour. It's totally outside the box thinking for Tom, and I'm really happy with the direction we've been going with these. I'm going to call it like the collection of those hops.
Cool. Jeremy?
I think the hop I'm most excited about is the one I haven't found yet.
Which actually I wanted to get into, but we sort of ran out of time.
Yeah.
But like, what is the hop you haven't found yet? Like, what's next for hops?
Well, it's interesting what was said about Brewer's Gold, because as it turns out, Brewer's Gold was part of the breeding program that basically gave us all the craft hops such as Cascade, Centennial, Columbus, probably even Simcoe and Citra, pretty much all of them. Brewer's Gold is like part of the lineage. So we've been looking back at old school varieties. The quintessential wild North American hop was Cluster, and it's worth revisiting. And I can't say I'm that excited about it. The one that I am real excited about was in the breeding program, and it's called HBC 344, and I just found out last month that it didn't make the cut because disease hit it, so it will no longer be supported. So it's kind of like the thing that we really liked, which had intense fruit characters and blackberries. It will not go into commercial production. So I think the old school varieties are, for that very reason, are worth revisiting.
So are we coming around? Are we doing a full circle where we're going back to the old school?
I think we might be. We might be like, tired of listening to what's on the radio and putting on some Sabbath.
Jason, what are you what are you into right now?
Well, we get to we're on this experimental program, like Jeremy was kind of touching on, where we get samples and they just have a number. We get to play with them. We have a small brewery in Aurora we get to pilot stuff off of, and that's a lot of fun to play with. But I'm really excited about Australian Galaxy hops. I just love it. We put it in Sidekick, and it's really one of my favorites right now. Tons of guava and passion fruit character that I love it.
That's a really hard question. I don't know. From our farm itself, what we grow, I guess the one that excites me the most is probably our Super Sauzer, just because it's like nothing anybody's been able to pull from it before. And we have quite a few brewers, like founders. We did a test batch of a session pale with it, and a couple of brewers are doing some really neat things. And it's just something new to play with that we figured out that no one else has yet.
Okay, this really is the last question. And Jeremy, you can answer it since you have the microphone. And then questions from you guys. Do you guys have questions? Okay, there's one question. Does anyone else have questions? Okay, there's some more questions. Which I really should have asked this first, but instead I'll ask it last. Like, we all know what hops are, and when we're tasting them, and the home brewers will already know the answer to this question. But Jeremy, explain exactly how and when hops are introduced into beer.
Oh, well, I mean, nowadays I think there's no end to when brewers they're using them in places probably when they shouldn't, like putting them in their malt silos and weird places, like, I don't know, the hops are finding their way into everything. But
okay, traditionally.
Okay, so the traditional ways that earlier in the brewing process, that being the boil, the more the essence oils go up the chimney, and you capture none of them, although some brewers would argue some of their flavor carries through, all you get is bitterness. So the 6-carbon ring collapses to a water-soluble 5-carbon ring due to the boil. We don't have to go into that. That's called isomerization, which is a fancy word for changes and goes into solution. That's bitterness.
So the very first step in brewing beer, boiling, hops go in, extracts bitterness.
No, traditional beer.
Traditional, yes.
And then
not this weird-ass triple dry hopped whatever.
I mean, I know.
I like that stuff too.
I know brewers in California that brew beer adding no hops, and then put all their hops in the fermenter and transfer unhopped wort into the fermenter.
What do they get out of that?
Pretty interesting shit.
Yeah, like what?
Like new flavors, I mean, the fermentation is like a second boil. If you've ever looked into your glass carboy, it kind of looks like a boil. You know, if you see the movement and the foam, and so you're gonna lose volatile compounds. And what's volatile? Volatile is anything you can smell. So aromatics, and that's why brewers would typically add hops later in the boil, sometimes in the middle for flavor if you're old school, towards the end, and there's flame out, whirlpool, and then after the fermentation is the most important part that defines IPA and all the beers, and that means it's all about the oil. So you're waiting till after the fermentation. Typically, you may or may not drop your yeast, because yeast are like little hot sponges. If you ever taste yeast at a brewery, it just tastes like hops. And you get then you add your hops to finish beer, and that's called dry hopping, and the English invented that, and the Germans say, oh, don't do that. But now even the Germans are doing that. So if you add it, the later you add it, the more you capture the aromatic qualities.
And that's really sort of what defines an IPA typically these days, right, is the aromatic quality and sort of the late addition.
If you can find an IPA that tastes really interesting that isn't dry hop, call me. We'll be right over.
Are English IPAs dry hop typically?
Typically, yes, but usually very lightly and not with the kind of pungent North American varieties.
Right. Cool. All right, there you go. How to. All right, questions, sir. Yeah, you, sir. Just talk loud.
I didn't know if we were passing mics. This question is for the hop farmers. Can you guys speak a little bit to latitude and how that translates to drinking local, supporting local, specifically in the Midwest?
So, what do you mean by latitude? So you just mean geographically latitude? You know,
I consider myself a person to know like decently enough about beer, but I, leading up to this event, I was trying to like educate myself a little bit more on hops, and found out that much of it was based on growing region, based on latitude of our planet.
well, there's certainly from a horticulture and botanical standpoint, hops do the best in terms of vigor and what their normal life cycle would be within a fairly, actually broad range of latitude. So you can get pretty reasonable yield and what I would consider to be like true to type aromatics and flavor anywhere from, I don't know, Bonnie, what do you think? Like southern Illinois, maybe at the furthest south, all the way up to, I know people in Saskatchewan that are growing some varieties that are better suited for that climate. And there certainly is, climate plays a factor in terms of what varieties we can grow. So, I don't know, what do you think? I mean that's pretty much it. Some varieties are, what we found over, whatever 10 years or so of research is that true European noble varieties, so things that are grown in Germany and the Czech Republic, Saaz, and true Hallertauer, Mittelfruer, and Triple Spalt, and things like that, Wurzbrucker, they don't necessarily do all that great in Wisconsin. And it comes down to what we believe, again, this is kind of a hypothesis. You look at the climate in Central Europe, and their day-night temperature fluctuation is very small compared to what I get in Wisconsin in July. Right? I can have 93 degrees, and then it'll drop to 63 degrees at night. So those noble varieties, they don't like you so much, right? So that's why we focus mainly on Brewer's Gold. It's one generation removed from a wild Manitoba hop. And it is the mother of most of our North American varieties, not all, most. It's very, very vigorous. So that's kind of where we take our cue and to look for the varieties that we're going to grow based on those genetics. But now, in terms of what do you mean by drinking locally?
In the very small amount of research I was able to do to kind of look into what you guys do, I felt very proud that a lot of the popular hop strains that we use aren't grown here. I didn't know that. I thought they were imported from overseas.
Right. Yeah, they can. A lot of them are a lot of harm. Citra and Simcoe and Amarillo and Mosaic and Palisade, and all those are patent protected. We can't touch them. We're not allowed to grow.
We could.
Well, yeah.
We could do it.
Yeah. We actually, physically, we could grow them. We're not allowed to. But that means it's up to us to come up with, if that's the trend, we have to come up with something of our own. So they have their Super Zazer, and we've got one we're working on called Top Secret. And yeah, some brewers like it, some brewers. Oh, soil impact terroir. Yeah. Right. So a lot of great research has been done with soil chemistry and hop chemical profiles. And what's been found is while there is a little bit of an impact from that, the bigger impact, and usually dwarfs any sort of soil or site chemistry, is sunshine, temperature, and rainfall. And even if you've got the same variety grown in, and I think the research project, they were looking at it in Slovenia, in the Czech Republic, Germany, and England, and they were growing 5 of the same varieties, and they were mapping their chemistry over 5 years. They were looking at the same variety across all 5 regions. What they found was that in any given year, there was a difference between sites, but the consistency year to year in the same site was all over the world. So that told us Mother Nature has more to say about the high notes of that variety than the soil chemistry does. But without a doubt, soil chemistry plays an important role in vigor and things like that. So.
Question. This is a question more towards the brewers, and I know this is a very, very, very broad question. But on the homebrewers, I feel like a lot of us like either want to start a brewery or maybe are just thinking about what would be like the one thing that you would say to somebody that's thinking about starting a brewery, would be the one thing that they need to either look at or do or learn about. Very well.
That's not a Hobbs question.
Sales. Yeah, costs. Sales, to me, is a big one. You're going to compete with a lot of other breweries, right? So you got to have a sales team. You got to have the ability to sell. After I was having this conversation with actually one of my sales members that's sitting right over here in the booth, just tonight before this talk, and I was saying, you know, I'm fascinated after 18 years in the business. I love to hear people's sales pitch. So I'm actually at O'Hare, and this guy grabs me, and he's like, hey, do you live in Chicago? I'm not selling a credit card. I want to talk to you about how to save money on energy. And unfortunately, my plane was boarding, so I couldn't stay, but I really wanted to hear his sales pitch, kind of sadistically, right? Because selling's hard for me. I'm not a natural-born salesman. I know how to make beer, but I don't know how to sell much of anything. I've learned, but I think that was a big shock for me when I got into business is, oh yeah, I make this beer, but it could be the best beer in the world, but it doesn't matter if I don't know how to sell it. So.
Probably say the same thing. I mean, it's like, right now, a lot of people can make good beer easily. That's the attraction of being a home brewer. I don't know about you guys, but I was relatively happy with how my first batch came out. You know, I was expecting it to taste like carbonated dishwater, you know, and then it came out drinkable, and I was like, wow, I'm pretty badass. You know, and I gave it to a friend, and he was like, this is terrible. But you know, nowadays there's a lot of good information out there on how to brew, but what people don't know is the industry and how it works. And you know, there's going to be a lot of brewers that make good beer, and sadly, they're not going to be able to find a place in the coming age. So do your homework. That's probably the best advice that I could give.
Maybe more relevant for me than either of these guys are living through it right now, but I think the biggest part was the cost, making sure you've got your costs straight. You are going to ask for people's money or pander for it on Kickstarter. Make sure you know how much you need and plan ahead. Right, and plan ahead, right? You're going to have to pay the spot price.
Jeremy said, and then triple it.
Yeah, he's right. Triple it. However long you think it's going to take you, double that. People don't just say that because they want to be vindictive. It's because it's the truth. And then go find yourself a Rob Brennan, and then a Serena Gambino. I've already got 2 sales reps, and I'm 14 months old. That was not in the budget. It was out of necessity. There's so many breweries right now.
Did you think you'd have any sales reps at this point when you started out?
No, I really didn't. I know how great our wholesaler is, and we continue to work great with them, but I think what we're trying to do is operate more intelligently. I had to literally write my own CRM program to help improve communication and follow-up. I spend Friday mornings with Rob and Serena just going through what are we learning, how are we consolidating and focusing our efforts so that we're keeping costs in line, and going to the right places that create both volume, balance, and influence. Those are constant conversations, and it's an almost impossible market right now.
Craft Beer Week 2016, we're going to do a panel about the state of the craft beer industry. This is like, this conversation, you tapped into something pretty hot. It's, there's so much beer and so many breweries right now. This is, everyone's asking the question you're asking. And it's, my own opinion is you have to find this perfect intersection of, if you don't have good beer, then it's over. It's got to be, not even good beer, it's got to be really good beer. I won't say great, I will say really good beer. And then a good, actually, when I talked to Randy Mosier, who, if you don't know who he is, then go figure out who he is. He knows who they know who he is. He used the term point of view, in which, like, what is Three Floyds? They're one big point of view. You know, I mean, end of the day, you need great beer, very good beer, point of view, cool packaging, sales, money. I mean, it's like you just
A tap room.
a tap room. Oh, that's where all the money's made now, right? I mean, there's
Tap room's where it's at. If you open a brewery right now, you better
well,
have a tap
good
room.
water. Actually, well, maybe next year we'll do the water. But talk about water real quick. We're next to Lake Michigan, which is probably was a big attraction for Lagunitas, right?
We have no water in California, so just don't build your brewery in California.
And we have Lake Michigan, so yeah. Go Chicago. More questions. Gentleman with the tie, straight from work.
All right, you just talked about sales. What, from the bigger beer industry, Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light, you guys are in the craft beer industry. If craft beer is starting to take market share from them, as owners, would you ever consider selling your business from them? Because I feel like those larger companies are going to come after you guys if you're very successful. So what would you do in that situation?
So we get that question almost weekly. I mean, from them. They call us, the investment bankers call us. Two brothers, we look at it as a legacy business. We're excited. I've got a 15-year-old son. Can't wait to get in the business. He'll be working in the lab this year. He has a real science desire, so he's going to be working in the lab this summer. We look at it as a legacy business for our family, but that's just us. I mean, everybody has their own methodology. There are a lot of people that are in it to grow it, to sell it, to make money. That's their prerogative. I think you're going to see a lot of consolidation over the coming years. It sort of is inevitable. You're seeing it now quite a bit if you're looking, but it's going to happen even more rapidly, I think. It's just an inevitability of the industry. You're seeing other craft brewers buying other craft brewers. There's going to be some of that, but there's always going to be, hopefully, guys like us, and there's a lot of other guys out there that are fiercely independent. Talking to Eric Wallace at Left Hand, owner of Left Hand, the other day, and he was saying, you know, they're battling the same thing. You know, Millers come knocking, and he actually welcomes them in and talks to them because he wants to gain their knowledge base, see what they're thinking. I've never actually brought them in. I thought, oh, that's smart. I should tap them for a little knowledge. But yeah, it's definitely coming.
Have you heard two brothers from both Anheuser-Busch and Miller? Both have expressed interest in what? I mean, is it, do they say, we want to buy you? Or is it, hey, let's have coffee and see if there's a fit?
Well, they're more like, let's get together and see if there's a fit. But to me, my dad always said, it never hurts to listen. That's one I won't listen to. It's just not worth it.
Why is it not worth it? I mean, why not just hear him out and see what the dollar figure is?
Well, I tell my guys, and my plant manager's sitting right over there, and he'll tell you, he's heard it a million times, I know how to make more money in the brewing business than I make, but I also have fun along the way. I treat my employees really well, I hope. And so the money isn't the important thing. It's the joy of what we do. It's bringing enjoyment to people. It's bringing people together like this around beer and having a discussion and bringing families together over a table at one of my restaurants. It's the ability to kind of chart my own course every day. I love that stuff. I know how to make more money. I know how to sell a business for money, but it's not anything I'm interested in. Although maybe I will take Eric's advice and bring him in to tap their knowledge base.
Becky, did you have a question in the back there?
I did, and so this is a question for the brewer, the
Please speak up.
You said that there seems like a subtle difference in the flavor profile of the hop. How do you know how it's going to taste? Does that really affect beer? Like, do you just like pop it in your mouth when you or
Oh God, no. You do that once and never again. Did you guys hear it? So basically, the question was, we were talking about subtle differences in flavor profiles, and maybe it was specific to the terroir thing, but how do we know what to expect, right? And how do we know we're being true to type and true to variety? Is that basically? Is that good?
Yeah, and it's not. I don't ask it as a question of like how do you know it's in type because the plant is
Right.
So
Right.
it's gonna have that sort of difference.
So how do we assess the quality of it? How do you assess the quality of it? Looks good.
And we present it to brewers. And how do I know? I don't taste it because you can't taste anything after you do that. Literally numbs your tongue. I've done it. Yes, you rub, pull it apart, and you do lots of observations, tactile, and just bringing it into your nose and breathing it in your hands, and you do it again and again from in the field at different stages, and you just learn it. Like you learn it, each one intimately, and you always present it to somebody that you regard their opinion. We hold it very highly. Like brewers that you trust, you have to get that, and you have to put yourself out there to have it tested by them, whether you're going to get a good report or a bad report, because the only way you can get better is you listen to all those comments and how do you dry better, how can we make a better pellet, how can we, timing with harvest, all of that. So it's a learned, and a lot of it is, it's just innate, and you have to develop it, just like brewers know that this is going to be a great beer, in the very end. When is it ready?
I mean, I'm the geekiest hot geek chemist nerd guy you're going to find here. So, I mean, I could talk to your eyes crossed about gas chromatography and all that kind of stuff, but our tagline is the proof is in the pint, because I can show you those things and drive you nuts, but if it doesn't come through as an added benefit for these guys, right? So, just like Bonnie said, it's learned, right? I can't teach that in a class. You have to go through it and take your lumps and figure out what is good and take your cues from people you trust.
All right, you guys look like you need to get up and move around and maybe drink a new beer. So one more question, sir?
Yes.
And I will encourage anyone who has an additional question, come up and grab any of us. Will be after we pee.
Good idea.
And get another beer. But everyone here will be hanging around a little bit, right? So don't hesitate to tap anyone on the shoulder.
Yes, I noticed that the cultural center things, and also Columbia College, that maybe it's donated to these facilities. I don't know, but I just got to give ups to you, because you make a damn good product, guys up there, and then for you to actually give it to the colleges and all these things, because I go to a lot of events, okay, and when I do go to these events, I run into y'all product, okay, IPA, things, that sort. And I think it's just, it's great that you do that.
That was a hat tip to the entire stage. Not a question. So now we'll take one more question, or we'll take one more hat tip. Okay, we'll take 2 more questions. bearded gentleman, and then gentleman in the sweater, and then we're really done. All right, go.
Can you guys talk about the experimental hop process?
No.
Oh, come on. How does like the experiment can go from like 100 different experiments to the one that we actually got mosaic?
All right, Jeremy's on this.
I'm going to try and be fast. So basically, back to like putting the pollen in the bag and getting seeds. They take, you know, like Mosaic is the daughter of Simcoe. Everyone's like, Simcoe's ahead. We could probably take germplasm or genetic material from Simcoe and make another hit. So they take, you know, a male and a female, put it together. You have thousands of unique seeds. They start them up and then they shower them with all the diseases. So there's probably some guy in every breeding program who's like the disease guy. And he's got them all. And he's ready to shower the little seedlings with his diseases. And he's providing a good service because they're trying to see, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, all of them are withered and there's like a couple that survive. And then they take them through, you know, the next step. Like, okay, do they have good agronomics? What is their yields? Do the cones pick off? Will the machines be able to get the cones off? Because if they can't, then that's a no-go. And at the very end of the window, there's what brewers care about, and all that other stuff has to make sense. And the other thing that used to matter the most was alpha acid. So it was, you know, when Anheuser-Busch and Heineken and all the big breweries controlled everything, it was all about the amount of bitterness that you could get from the hop, and then how much pounds per acre of that, because that was all about alpha per acre. That is changing, but it still matters. So that's the quickest way I can answer that. Sir?
Sure. So craft beer is having a larger and larger role in food service and restaurants or this place, right? How do you guys find your role in the, you know, going from hops to beer to restaurants to kind of culinary? We got the restaurant show in town. How does this affect, you know, the department table movement and some of these, you know, enlightened eaters that are connected to where their stuff is coming from, and, you know, enlightened beer drinkers that want to know what cool farms they're coming from? How do you guys feel about that?
Did everybody hear that? Question was, what's the connection from brewer to the industry, whether it's farm to table movement, a local movement? I'm paraphrasing kind of, but it's more or less, you know, how do we support that? How do we kind of become a part of that, and what do we do?
And I'd assume there's an increased appetite for that, for
Yeah.
what you do as well in that movement.
Sure, absolutely, and I think everybody's more aware. So I think what we have to do as brewers is be constantly, you know, communicating and sharing information about, you know, our point of view, our perspective. I think everybody kind of referenced individualized point of view here, and then what do you support? Who do you choose to do business with? And that plays a big role into who we go out and work with on a regular basis. There's a lovely lady here sitting at the table named Megan. She used to run a program over at Feast and got us a brochure, and she didn't do a lot of volume for us, but I felt so honored to work with her because she was so honest and authentic. And the beer dinner we did was so dynamite, so great. She worked so hard, and at the end of the day, it was like I wanted to work with Megan. And that's a big part of how we present ourselves as a brewer, because there's, I don't know, Windy City services 5,000 different liquor licenses in Chicagoland-ish, maybe a little short of that. We're obviously not going to make enough beer to be everywhere, and nor do I think we should be everywhere. But Lagunitas is a different position. Two Brothers is a different position. I think we'd all like to think that we're very authentic with what we do on a daily basis, and we support the right people the right way, and we try to do that the best to our ability. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Kind of. Somebody else want to give it a shot? Oh, yeah.
Beer.
Nice.
On that, like, what kind of beer are you eating guys? So I was excited.
Just as an aside, or to answer that question, as a grower, so we you know, I'm from Madison, and so that sort of cognizance of farm to table is very strong there, and so we in the farming industry, we saw that the consumer of the beer was asking questions. Where did these hops come from? And they weren't maybe so much concerned about, you know, or is it a local farmer versus, you know, a big, you know, mega farm out west. They were more concerned about the path, what happened to their raw ingredients. And from that aspect, our brewers took a cue, so we wrote a grant proposal to the state of Wisconsin, Department of Ag, and it was awarded a couple of years ago, where we built a database for all of our brewer customers. So they can go online, they can look up our lot number, and because we have 28 growers in our program, they can look at each lot and they can drill down into the grower to find out what growers contributed to that lot, and then they can drill down into that grower's production practices and found out, you know, what they sprayed on these things, what temperature they were held at, all the way from, you know, training all the way up all through harvest, pelletizing what's in their beer. And I was looking for money. I mean, you know, hey, I got a grant, so what the hell, let's give this a shot. But the prototyping that and the sort of the beta testing we did on it was very popular, and the number of hits we got just from the few, you know, dozen or 2 dozen brewers, and they kept going back, and then it became a resource because also all the chemistry was there, and it told them a more complete story. So I think there's a role for that, not just in our beer products, but in all of our food, where it can provide the consumer with that sort of full spectrum knowledge of what they're consuming. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. This is Trey wants to finish. Here comes Trey. Trey put this panel together.
I want to finish with the final tip of the hat, because these aren't the panelists that I just happened to be able to get together. I kind of asked some other friends, and I had my own idea what would be like the A-team panel we could put together, people who would be available, and everyone that I asked is sitting here right now. So, and whether they came from 2 blocks away, or the suburbs, or Wisconsin, Michigan, or California, I was so stoked that every one of these guys was able to do this event with us tonight. So, I obviously thank all of you guys for coming, you know, participating in Craft Beer Week. We do have one more event here tomorrow night, the Division Street IPA Crawl, which this is the 3rd year we've done it. In the past, it was with Small Bar and Bangers and Lace. Small Bar, as most of you probably know, is not there anymore. So it's us, Bangers and Lace, and Fat Four doing an IPA call tomorrow night. But thank you guys all for coming. Let's give another round of applause for these amazing players.
Thank you.
And stick around. We've got plenty of beer to drink, and I'm willing to do a shot of whiskey if anyone's interested. So. I know he is. That's why I invited him.